Hi, I'm Shannon. The speech that I chose was We Shall Overcome by Lyndon Baines Johnson. I hadn't heard this speech before the assignment, so this was my first time hearing it. This speech was given because of what happened in Selma, which involved 3 people peacefully protesting, 2 which were brutally beaten, and 1 which was killed. The speech was also given because African Americans were being denied the right to vote. Lyndon Johnson's speech inspired the American people to stand up for what is right and put their bigotry and hatred aside to stand up for justice. We shall overcome is a very powerful statement. The word we, meaning everyone, all Americans, hatred, fear, and ignorance, all things that needed to be overcome in order to move on to a brighter future for the United States and the American people. Lyndon used ethos, pathos, and logos in his speech to help his intended purpose, which was to get the American people to stand with him. One example of when he uses ethos to help his intended purpose is when he says, "All men are created equal, government by consent of the governed. Give me liberty or give me death." He's using famous American quotes to show the injustice that the African American people were facing. Injustice that was disgraceful to the brave soldiers that lost their lives fighting for our freedoms. What African Americans were facing was unethical, bringing in how ashamed people that fought for our country would feel about the situation made people realize how unethical the situation really was. Pathos was used quite a lot throughout the speech. One example of pathos was when he said, "So, it was last week in Selma, Alabama. There, long-suffering men and women peacefully protested the denial of their rights as Americans. Many were brutally assaulted. One good man, a man of God, was killed." These words, innocent, woman, peacefully, brutally assaulted, and the phrase, man of God, are what provoked the emotions. When one is innocent, it implies that they did not deserve what happened to them. Women evoked emotion because people see women to be defenseless and weaker than men. The women were beaten by those people, peacefully showed that they hadn't done anything wrong. Brutally assaulted is a powerful statement to provoke an emotion because you can't imagine what they went through. And the phrase man of God made the listeners feel like this guy was good, innocent. He didn't deserve what happened to him. He did a great job of using pathos. I think this is what made the speech as powerful as it was. It even had me clapping and nodding my head to this day. Logos is also used quite a few times throughout the speech. One great example is the quote, "There is no cause for pride in what has happened in Selma. There is no cause for self-satisfaction in the long denial of equal rights of Americans." This appeals to logic because it is stating what happened in Selma was despicable, and there is no reason for it. And it's hard to argue that. There's no logic to what happened to those 3 people. The part of Lyndon B. Johnson's speech that was most interesting to hear about is when he was talking about what kind of process an African American needed to go through simply to vote. After listening to the speech, I decided to do a little bit more research, and I came across a quote from the Constitutional Rights Foundation that stated, "A mere 3% of voting-age black men and women in the South were registered to vote in 1940. In Mississippi, under 1% were registered." A quote from that same website that was more relevant to the time of the speech was, "Through the efforts of local civil rights leaders like Medgar Evers and other Americans, about 43% of adult black men and women were registered to vote in the South by 1964. 43% by 1964 is crazy to me. Slavery had been ratified for so many years. African Americans were supposed to have equal rights, yet so many people were still being denied to vote. I think that this speech was so powerful and effective at reaching the American people. I'm surprised this speech wasn't ever shown in my history class. It's far more powerful than a textbook. I'm glad that I was able to listen to it. Thank you for listening to me.